The enemy of your enemy is your friend. So it looks like Indonesia and Vietnam have joined forces to dismember their common enemy, China. The two countries kept fighting for long with each other over disputes over the Natuna Islands in the South China Sea, and China kept making the most out of it. Not anymore. Hi and welcome, you are watching India's World. We discuss geopolitics here. Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon for more interesting videos. Indonesian President Joko Widodo declared Thursday that all maritime disputes between Indonesia and Vietnam have been resolved. The peace talks over the disputed Natuna Islands were going on for 12 years. President Widodo said in a statement, after 12 years of intensive negotiations, Indonesia and Vietnam can finally conclude the EEZ boundaries of the two countries based on the 1982 UNCLOS. This development will encourage other parties to the South China Sea dispute, barring China, to resolve their bilateral maritime claims. For example, similar peace talks over the South China Sea can take place between Vietnam and the Philippines and Vietnam and Malaysia. If that happens, all nations will be able to focus on the elephant in the room, called the People's Republic of China. It is important to note that the peace talks concluded between Indonesia and Vietnam are bound to irk China big time. The South China Sea is being claimed by 6 parties: Brunei, China, Malaysia, the Philippines, Vietnam, and Taiwan. Each party has its own set of maritime boundaries, but Beijing's claims are the most expensive. Details of the newly reached Indonesia-Vietnam agreement have not been announced, but their EEZ claims lie within China's so-called 9-dash line that Beijing uses to demarcate its historical rights over almost 90% of the South China Sea, so-called historical rights. Now, China would insist that they have jurisdiction over these areas. A UN tribunal in 2016 rejected China's 9-dash line, but Beijing has so far rejected the ruling, calling it null and void. China is likely to voice protest against the new Indonesia-Vietnam agreement. The fact of the matter is that the conclusion of peace talks between Indonesia and Vietnam is a big security threat to the Chinese government. Now, both Indonesia and Vietnam will be able to better focus on the Chinese threat. They would be able to channel all their military and economic assets to stonewall China's attempts to intrude into their waters. In fact, Indonesia has already begun preparing to mount a military threat on China. Nikkei Asia reported Wednesday that Indonesia's newly appointed top military commander wants to boost training with the US and carry out an operation to secure territory near the South China Sea. So far, Vietnam and Indonesia would waste a lot of resources while fighting multi-front wars in the South China Sea. For example, in 2017, a Vietnamese Coast Guard vessel reportedly intercepted an Indonesian attempt to escort Vietnamese boats that were caught fishing in the disputed waters. The incident resulted in an Indonesian officer being held by the Vietnam Coast Guard. Similarly, a diplomatic squabble took place in 2019 when Indonesia destroyed 38 Vietnamese flagged vessels accused of engaging in IUU fishing. Hanoi protested the action, arguing that Jakarta wrongly arrested Vietnamese fishers. The latest incident was in late March last year when the Indonesia Coast Guard arrested 2 Vietnamese fishing vessels that Vietnam claimed were operating in their waters. While Vietnam and Indonesia kept fighting with themselves, China would often get away with its illegal actions in the South China Sea, but it is soon going to be a thing of the past. China will now be thrashed left, right and center if it ever tries to enter South China Sea waters with evil intentions.
India's World, telling the right side of the story.